So today we're going to build this blanket chest slash storage bench slash entryway bench. So my brother-in-law and sister-in-law needed a place where they could store some shoes, blankets, and basically stuff near the entryway, but also something they could comfortably sit on and put shoes or boots on before you go outside. So this fit the bill nicely. It's not like a traditional settee. There's no arms or a back on it, but it is definitely something you can sit on. Open up the lid. We've got some torsion hinges on there that resist the falling, but also allow the top to stay open without any additional hardware, which is kind of nice. I've got some cleats on here just to strengthen the top, especially because I am encouraging people to sit on this thing. Plenty of storage space inside, and obviously a very Asian-influenced, Greene Greene influenced design here. A lot of the structure with the rails and stiles was inspired by the Blacker House. They have doors at the Blacker House, and by the way, that's a Greene Greene bungalow, Southern California. Look it up, awesome stuff. But the tapered stiles here was something that I was really inspired by when I saw I believe it's an entryway door at that house. Pretty amazing. So I just combined that with my love of some, curved legs and things like that, curves on the bottom here, to do something that's very Greene Greene influenced, all the way down to the dark red finish and the ebony plugs. All right, let's get to it. Let's get started with the legs. The final dimension will be 2 inches square, so in order to avoid any glue lines, we'll utilize 10/4 stock. I'll rough cut the legs at the bandsaw. Yeah, there's no reason for that guard to be up that high. I likes my fingers, and I plan on keeping them. Each leg is squared up at the jointer and then planed to final size. I actually cut a couple of extra just in case things go wonky. Each leg is then cut to length using the sled at the table saw. Once you have all 4 legs cut out, you have to start thinking about arrangement, which ones are going in the front, which ones in the back. If you have any flaws in the boards, of course, put those in the back. They're not going to be seen as much. But we do need to cut into each face, and that curved cut sometimes does funny things with the grain. So what you want to do is arrange the boards with the end grain making some sort of sense. You want some symmetry there, because that way it'll help ensure equivalent looking faces on the outside. So let me show you some of the details here. Now I've drawn here to show you where the grain is actually going, just in case you can't see it. And this is what I'm talking about with symmetry. These 2 pieces, they kind of look symmetrical, mirror image of one another. That's good. But up here, things are all kinds of wacky. So it's a real good idea to start moving the pieces around to get them to look like mirror images. Now that's pretty good, because this one is now a mirror image of the one below it. This guy needs some work. Maybe flip that over this way. And now we actually have sort of this 4-way symmetrical design. And I think that'll give us a better face on the outside. Using a piece of 1/2 inch MDF, I'll make a template for the leg curve. Once rough cut, I'll do the final smoothing with a flexible sanding strip. Now I can use the template to draw a consistent curve on each leg. The first cut is pretty simple, but the second cut requires us to tape the off cut back onto the leg so that we can see the curve line and make that second cut. And there's our curvy leg. Now I didn't originally plan on using this template as a routing template, but last minute I thought it would be nice to have more consistency here. So I stick the template to the legs using the CA Glue blue tape trick. While I'm comfortable performing this routing operation, there's no doubt that it would be much easier and safer if the template were longer than the workpiece, and better yet, if the template were itself a sled with toggle clamps. By the way, I'm glad I had a couple extra legs, because I noticed one of them has a really nice crack in the center, and I don't feel like dealing with that. Bad leg. It's not really safe to start routing right at the corner of a workpiece, so each one of these needs a little bit of a cleanup right at the edge. I mean, really, any excuse to use this cute little plane. Now let's cut the rails. One of my favorite Greene Greene details is the classic cloud lift. It's a really cool way to dress up a rail. You can pretty much shape these any way you like, but I prefer a nice simple S-curve. Once cleaned up, I can use this template everywhere that the project calls for a cloud lift. I really want the lower level of the cloud lift to be clean, straight, and consistent from piece to piece, so I carefully clean them up at the table saw, making stopped cuts. I can finesse the rest of the cloud lift so that it blends in nicely. The bottom of the rails receives a nice symmetrical curve, so we'll draw those on and cut them out. To make a groove for the panels, I'll utilize a slot cutting bit. I like this solution because the bearing follows the cloud lifts perfectly. An alternative would have been to maybe use the table saw to cut this groove first and then cut the shape, but that usually involves having a much deeper groove than we really need. Now we can cut the various styles. Each style gets a little tongue at the end that fits into the groove that we just cut. Just a little test fit before going too far. Now the wide center styles receive a taper on each side, which we'll cut at the bandsaw and then smooth with a hand plane. Since the styles have straight edges, I can use the table saw to cut those panel grooves. And when the styles are inserted, the grooves should line up perfectly. Next up, the mortise and tenon joinery. I mark the mortise locations on the rails and the legs using a straight edge and a stop. I'll then do a dry assembly, making sure everything fits. The legs need a stopped groove for the panels, so while the unit is assembled, I'll mark the locations of the grooves on the legs. I'll set my router for a 3/8 inch cutting depth, and then plow the grooves. Nailed it! Now we can put this thing together again to measure for the panels. The panels will be resawn from thicker stock down to a 1/4 inch thick. My goal here is not to have any glue ups for these panels, so we're making some pretty substantial cuts. At the planer, we'll bring the panels down to a final 1/4 inch and test the fit. The panels are then cut to size and squared up at the table saw. Some of the panels require cutouts to match the shape of the rail. We get that shape by using the rail itself and then cutting away the stuff that we don't need. Let's test fit a side assembly with the panels. It's looking pretty decent. And after making a little taper cut on the front panels to match the tapered styles, we can test fit the front as well. Everything is sanded thoroughly, and a small roundover is added to all of the exposed edges. Anything the router can't reach is done by hand. Now for some ebony plug mortises. This is really a hallmark of the Greene Greene style, and the piece just felt a little bit naked without them, so I had to include a few. Using Darryl Peart's square punches and a drill, I can create the mortises pretty quickly, and then clean things up with a chisel. We'll make the actual ebony plugs later. The box features a drop-in plywood bottom, so we'll need some cleats to support that. I'll cut that stock with some miters on the ends. Boop! And the cleats are then glued and nailed to the inside of the bottom rails. Now I can carefully measure for the bottom panel and cut it to size. I also notched the corners to make room for the legs. To make life a little easier, we're going to finish this piece before assembly. This offers a few advantages. First, it's much easier to apply finish to separate parts, as there are no annoying corners where the finish likes to pull up. Second, we can use a buffer on all the surfaces without worrying about bumping into adjacent surfaces. Third, if we have any squeeze out during the glue up, it's pretty easy to clean that up since the glue is less likely to absorb into finished wood. And fourth, should the panels shrink in the future, they won't expose to unfinished areas and create an eyesore. The finish I'm using here is Rubio in a mahogany color. Because the project has so many mortise and tenon joints, I'll insert the tenons with glue into all of the rails and let that dry first. This reduces the number of surfaces that require glue during that final glue up by about 50%. Even with the tenons pre-glued, I still need some additional working time, so I'm going to use liquid hide glue. This should give me a solid 15 minutes to work. We'll start by gluing up the two sides. The finish rags help prevent dents in the wood or marring of the new finish. The front panel assembly is a little bit nerve-wracking, to say the least, but with everything laid out ahead of time, it's not too bad getting it in place and lining everything up. All of the stiles are glued into place, but the panels are left floating, no glue. Now the front can be joined to the sides. The bottom goes in next, and then the back assembly. Finally, the other side is attached. We'll drop some weight into the bottom panel, and that should help apply pressure while the glue dries. Now we can make those ebony plugs. It starts with an ebony turning blank that I cut into 1/4-inch sticks. With the stick chucked into a drill, I can use a series of sandpaper grits on a soft surface to create that beautiful pillowed look. By the way, this clever method is something that I learned from the great William Ng, who runs an amazing school in Anaheim, California. Ebony is so dense that it buffs to a really nice shine on a buffing wheel. From there, we can release the plug from the end of the stick with a handsaw. To make it easier to drive the plug home, I'll use a chisel to taper the bottom slightly. With some glue in the mortise, the plugs can be driven home. There are different schools of thought about ebony plugs in terms of their shape and how much they should protrude. If they stick out too far, they just look like warts, so I prefer to keep mine very low profile. The top of the chest will be made from 2 nice pieces of 5/4 African mahogany. We'll mill them flat and square, and then glue them together. After the glue dries, we sand the panel smooth and cut it to final size. I seem to be on a big bevel kick lately, so we'll add a nice bevel to the underside perimeter. I'll make the cut at the table saw using a tall fence, so it's a real good idea to wax the fence and the table before making a cut like this. There's likely going to be burning, but that's no problem, we'll clean it up later. The front edge gets a smaller bevel, but it's cut the same way. To help reinforce the top, I'll add 2 solid battens. To make them less boring, I'll add a little curve. To attach them, I'll just counterbore and then drill an elongated through hole. This allows the screws to grip the top while allowing for seasonal wood movement. Now we need to apply the finish to the top. Same stuff as before. The top will be attached to the base using torsion hinges. When I attached the hinges to the back rail, I quickly realized that I didn't quite account for the shape of the legs. Shouldn't be too hard to take just a little bit of material away and provide just enough clearance. I'm sure you're cringing at me taking a block plane to a finished piece, but wait until you see how easy it is to fix. Once the lid is good to go, I finesse the back of the legs and then reapply a coat of finish. And it's like it never happened. So here it is. The final result is way more green and green than I expected it to be. I really just set out to do something that was kind of Asian themed in a way, and maybe a little bit of green and green influence, but by the time we add the cloud lifts, then it's like, let's do ebony plugs, and next thing you know, it's heavily influenced by green and green. And that's fine. I love green and green. I just wasn't intending on building a green and green piece. But I think one of the best features here, anytime you're building something like this with a lid, you do have to consider safety, and that's why I love these torsion hinges. Number one, you don't need any kind of a stop, some of the traditional hardware that we would have in place here to keep the lid open. We also have hinges here that are resisting this thing falling on its own, so there will be no crushed fingers. Jay's got 2 little girls, and I would hate for my nieces to end up with a crushed finger from a piece of furniture that I built. So really happy with the way this turned out. I think these cleats are gonna go a long way to support that top. Normally, I don't worry too much about cleats on a top. I think most of the time it's pretty stable, but we're talking about something that we're inviting people to sit on, and that weight over time I think could be problematic, so I like having those supports underneath. And the other thing about this project that's really interesting was we built it in 5 days. We started on a Monday and finished on a Friday. So I'm happy to say that Jay working with me in the shop, it's turning out to be really great, very efficient. We're able to move a lot faster, which means we'll be able to produce more content. In this particular build, I think there's a few decisions we made that actually made this go faster. We used dominoes instead of traditional mortise and tenons. We used the slot cutting bit to do all of the joinery for the stiles so that that little tongue fits in the same thing that the panels fit into. That simplified things. We also used really wide boards, and we didn't have to do many panel glue ups to get all of these panels in place. And then finally, we used a one-step finish. It's a beautiful finish that goes on, provides just enough protection, but it's one coat and done. So here we are with a finished product in just 5 days. Amazing. So thank you for watching, everyone. I hope this inspires you to build something, whether it looks like this or something different. If it gets you out in the shop, that's always a good thing. Thanks for watching.